welcome back to Coaching with the Bible. This is episode 103, season 2, episode 49. Our portion this week is the portion known as Shoftim, and our topic this week is on being wholehearted. There are some topics that we deal with here in Coaching with the Bible that I feel pretty good about in terms of what I'm up to, how I'm doing, and so when I speak about them here, I feel like I come from a position of, I wouldn't say an authority, but at least someone who's handling their business with respect to that thing. So if it's talking about, like last week, we talked about, on building a certain type of home. We talked about, framing and reframing and all those different conversations about strategy and structure. All that stuff I feel really comfortable in and feel really good about when I talk about them. And then there are those topics which I really am in it and struggling and working through at the same time as I'm talking about them with you here on Coaching with the Bible. And wholeheartedness is one of them. This is like at the heart of everything and feels like a massive undertaking to try to really work on and develop and build and to become better at being a more wholehearted person. And the question first is obvious, is what exactly does that mean to be a wholehearted person? Where does it come up in the context of the Bible? Of course, that's sort of our muse and what drives us here and gets us into these conversations. And then how do we become a more wholehearted person in our day-to-day? Usual structure. But admittedly, at the outset, I want to say that wholeheartedness is hard. And to share the quote from our teacher on the subject for this week, Brene Brown, who is the master on this subject among so many other things, wholeheartedness is hard, but not fully living our lives is much harder and much more dangerous. Brene Brown is the person who's written, I think, the most on the subject, did the research on the subject, and as she has been sort of our teacher, our rabbi, our go-to person on so many of what we'll call the soft skills, which are really the hard skills and the difficult things to really work on about ourselves, wholeheartedness is right at the core of that. And so where does it come up? So it happens to be that in the course of this week's reading, the Bible tells us, God tells us through Moses during one of his speeches at the end of his life, that the person should be, the Hebrew term is tamim. Tamim is the Hebrew word. The root of that word in Hebrew, give me a minute here in the Hebrew, is tam. And I always thought that that word meant pure or innocent. And so when the Bible exhorts us or commands us or tells us or asks of us to be that, tamim, that Hebrew word, I always sort of thought about it in the context of being pure and innocent and in the context of our service or worship in a religious context, that it meant to sort of be pure in that way towards the relationship with God. And then last week I came across a whole slew of translations which I never really looked at. And I never really sought out the translations in English because I thought I knew what the word meant. Turns out I didn't. It turns out then, therefore, I didn't really understand any of the commentaries. But really what the Bible means is that the person should be wholehearted in their relationship with God. That's what that means. Wholehearted in their relationship with God. Keep that in mind. What does that mean exactly? And then the reality of it is that as much as it comes up in the context of the Bible here this week, the larger context in which it comes up in the Bible this week is in the Bible telling us to not listen to and to not take heed of and to not pay attention to false prophets or false gods or people who are idol worshipers, but rather a person should go and be wholehearted with God. The implication being that staying away from all those other beliefs, staying away from all those other systems, and simply focusing on the relationship with God will allow a person to be wholehearted in that way. The first place where this comes up in the Bible, let's take a slightly deeper dive this week into it, is this concept of a wholeheartedness first appears in the Bible when the Bible introduces us to Noah. The Bible tells us that Noah was righteous, and then that word again, meaning that Noah was righteous and wholehearted. Fascinating. And then next, it comes up with Abraham, that God says to Abraham right before he is commanded to do a circumcision, God says to him, walk before me and be wholehearted. Now, what exactly does that mean? What exactly does it mean to be wholehearted in the religious context? And then therefore, ultimately, what does it mean to be wholehearted in the human context? And so in the religious context, what seems to be the case is that when a person is acting wholeheartedly, it means basically that he's not listening to anything on the outside. He is not influenced by any of the other voices or noises or sound that's coming his way or her way, but he's very much focused in on the relationship and is essentially complete and whole in the relationship with God. And so that's the only sort of conduit, that's the only sort of network, relationship, conversation that's going on, and they're good with it there. They don't have a lot of questions, they're not seeking out the future, they're accepting and okay in the space that they're in, inhabiting the space that they're in right now, as it relates to God, as it relates to life, as it relates to everything around them. It would appear that that is some sort of a simple and pure, but that's really not what it is. And so when a person lives wholeheartedly in the spiritual domain, what basically means is that they have this idea that whatever is happening to them, what is happening in their life, is happening for a reason. And that the deeper that they go into it and the closer that they get to the core, to the source of it, let's put source with a big S in the sense that it may be God in the religious context, that everything is fine, that they're okay in that space. And to be wholehearted in the religious environment is a very high level. When one looks at the actual commandments, the idea of being wholehearted is actually not listed among the 613 in terms of the commandments. To my mind, it's sort of more core. It's so fundamental. It's so at the root of everything that it precedes anything else on some level. So it's a deep level of faith. It's a deep level of cleaving and connecting. That's where wholeheartedness lives. Now, outside of the realm of religion and in the space where we talk most often here about coaching with the Bible is about improving as human beings, as getting better at life, at improving as leaders, we can appreciate, as I said to you before, that wholeheartedness is hard. And so here's the quote from Brene Brown, which is, what exactly does it mean to live wholeheartedly? And she says as follows. This is from the book, one of her books called The Gifts of Imperfection. Wholehearted living is about engaging with our lives from a place of worthiness. It means cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am enough. It's going to bed at night thinking, yes, I am imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the truth that I am also brave and worthy of love and belonging. Now, you say that to yourself every night before you go to sleep and when you wake up in the morning. Probably your life will improve, but the more we start to think about worthiness and coming at things from a place of worthiness, essentially deservedness, from a place of personal self-compassion and from a place of courage and bravery, one will then ultimately live a more wholehearted life. But wholeheartedness is a practice. Like a lot of the things that we talk about here, it's a skill set that we have to work on. And as she writes in the book, it's a North Star. It's not necessarily something that we'll ever actually get to, but it's something that we're striving towards. And as we continue to operate and work on these different areas of our lives, the closer we get to this North Star. Now, I like to do these different kinds of things, and on her website, Brene Brown has what's called a wholehearted inventory. it's like one of these quizzes that you would take on any other website. I talked about one that I took early on in Coaching with the Bible around grit. I've done a few of them, and so I decided that I would take the wholehearted inventory on her website and figure out and find out for myself, like, okay, how wholehearted am I? Right? And so what happens in her work is that Brene Brown defines 10 guideposts with respect to becoming a more wholehearted person. And what that means is that each one of these different guideposts is something that you are moving away from or letting go of, and something you're working towards, right? So there's one thing that you are cultivating, that's the moving towards, and there's something you're letting go of, that's the moving away. So there's some sort of an action where you're moving away from something and moving closer to something in 10 specific domains. And as a person works on those 10, that's how a person moves into the space of becoming a more wholehearted person. Now, I'm not going to go through all 10 here, but I will post a visual of it so you can see all of it. Here's one example. So a person is cultivating authenticity and letting go of what other people think. Cultivating authenticity, letting go of what other people think. So the authenticity piece is the part that moves a person towards wholeheartedness. Letting go of what other people think moves a person away from other kinds of ways in life, what's holding them back, what holds back their courage, what holds back their compassion, what holds back all kinds of behaviors and actions and accomplishments. But being authentic, we know, is hard. And so if a person wanted to practice being authentic, they might think as follows. When I'm at my best, I am blank. Fill in the blank. So how do you practice authenticity? Is that when you're looking at the places where you're best, where you're operating, where you feel like you're most inside yourself, when I'm at my best, I am blank. And then give yourself permission to show up that way on a regular basis. So I'm not going to go through all 10, but let's just say on the list of her wholehearted inventory, I did better on some and I did worse on others. And that is certainly the case. But admittedly, the one where I thought I would do better and the one where I did worse was really here. The one I did the worst on was guidepost number 2, which was letting go of numbing and powerlessness and cultivating resiliency and resilient spirit. I thought I would do better there. I didn't. Guidepost number 2 on letting go of perfectionism and cultivating more self-compassion. I would have thought I would have done better because I really don't feel like myself as a perfectionist. But I do know that perfectionism as a behavior is effectively armor that holds a person back from being more vulnerable and more willing to take risks. And I thought I was more of a risk taker, but apparently, based on how I answered, I am not. So I have work to do. But the one I wanted to sort of dive in on a little bit more is guidepost number 10. Guidepost number 10 is letting go of being cool and always in control and cultivating laughter, song, and dance. What someone wrote in one of their blog posts called LSD. Not that LSD, different LSD, but the legal kind and probably the good kind. And so when a person is sort of feeling like they are trying too hard to always be in control, they should gin up a little bit of LSD, laughter, song, and dance, to be in a better space and to cultivate a more wholehearted experience. And so what she writes in the book is laughter, song, and dance create emotional and spiritual connection. They remind us of the one thing that truly matters when we are searching for comfort, celebration, inspiration, or healing. We are not alone. But when we're trying to always stay in control, or always trying to sort of look cool, none of that is possible. Think about like teenage kids, for example. I remember when I taught high school, I used to have a conversation with my students about what does it mean to be cool? Like, what does that actually mean to be cool? And they went through this whole exercise of defining coolness. And we talked about why that's good and why coolness not so good. And so what happens when we don't care about being cool? What opens up for us when we don't worry so much about being in control? That sort of straddles the line of the religious idea of wholeheartedness that we talked about earlier. So when a person is living inside the spiritual domain, they're living comfortably inside the relationship with God, so then they know that they're not in control, or they believe deeply that they're not in control. And so it's a different sort of experience. And so here on this side, with respect to a person, this is something I'm going to have to work on, is how will I develop and start to cultivate more laughter, singing, and dancing in my life? Now, dancing is the one I am least comfortable with because I think I'm pretty bad at it. But also, it's not really something that I generally want to do in front of other people. Singing, I'm okay with. I should sing more. I used to think that I sing a lot around the house. I probably need to laugh more. I definitely need to laugh more and create more laughter in my life. And so one of the blogs, one of the articles that I saw about how do we practice this, how do I move towards becoming less cool and more focused on cultivating this laughter, song, and dance, or cultivating wholeheartedness. So I have to sort of appreciate the following quote as well. A lot of this, as I said, is from Brene Brown, but a lot of it from the Torah side, from the Bible side, admittedly, is from the deep commentaries, going all the way back to the Talmud, going all the way through contemporary sources in the Hasidic and ultra-Orthodox communities as well, who deeply connect to the ideas of wholeheartedness and cleaving and connecting to the spiritual, to God. But also here's this last quote that I'll share from the book. When we value being cool and in control over granting ourselves the freedom to unleash the passionate, goofy, heartfelt, and soulful expressions of who we are, we betray ourselves. When we consistently betray ourselves, we can expect to do the same to the people we love. And so even if it's not for you, it is for the people that you love as well. So we have to sort of figure out how to get a little bit more weird with what it is that we're trying to do in our lives. And so here's the practice, right? When you notice that for yourself that you're sort of low on this sort of space of cultivating and you're more focused on being in control and all cool and all that other stuff, a little bit of laughter, singing, and dancing. But next time when you think that, what if people think I'm weird? Remember the following, that fitting in is far less important. This is from I can't even pronounce the name of, Mindful Ambition blog. Remember that fitting in is far less important than making authentic connections with others. Don't let a fear of looking weird prevent you from doing the things that serve you. So if that is getting up, singing, and dancing, if that is laughing out loud, if that is telling a great joke and just belly laughing with other people, or even faking it and pretending that that's the case, all these things can actually help you cultivate the laughter, song, and dance that makes you more present in life and makes you enjoy where you're living in the moment in the wholehearted space of life. Now, one can do this with every single one of the different guideposts along the way, but really focus in and appreciate what the concept here is. This is a concept that's built all the way through. It's a sub-strand, sub-theme that's going on throughout the Bible. And it is something that all of us are always continuing to need to work on, is being more wholehearted. There are not a lot of people who really live wholehearted lives. Perhaps if you think about yourself in the context of the people that you know in your network, maybe you'll come across a couple of people who sort of, what you feel like they live differently. They're living and loving with, this is her definition, living and loving with their whole hearts, despite all the risks and all the uncertainties that come with it. So that's the one I'm going to start with, is the laughter, song, and dance. Family, you're warned. But this is how we get better. This is how we improve. I have other ones that I need to work on. I recommend you take the inventory and sort of see how wholehearted you are and sort of learn and try to figure out and go deep into the work and develop the North Star so you become a more wholehearted person, which ultimately makes you a better friend, a better parent, a better colleague, a better spouse, and ultimately a better human being, which it is what we're striving for here with Coaching with the Bible. See you next week.